Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki jai. Sri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shyamakunda Radhakunda Giri Govardhan ki jai. Sri Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Sri Navadip Mayapur Dham ki jai. Gangamayi ki jai. Jamunamayi ki jai. Bhakti Devi ki jai. Tulsi Devi ki jai. Samaveda Bhaktivinoda ki jai. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees. All glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Sri Guru Gauranga Nitai Gaur Premanande Hare Hare Gaur. Prabhu, 2 microphones are required? Why? I feel like I'm holding a press conference. Where's that water? No, not good. There's that little water bottle. I couldn't find it. Okay, let's try it. Thank you. Yes, thank you. Yes. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swamini Chanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharane Namaste Sunyavadi Puspecta Devi Charane. Om Aganatiminandasya Janatanasalakaya Takshu Sumilitam Jena Tadsmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya Manavistam Stapitam Venabhutale Sayam Prakadamaya Mudati Sapadantikam Manushya Kalpa Tarubhyascha Krita Sindhu Vayivacha Paticharam Pavane Yogakshavayam Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Who remembers anything from yesterday's class? Please raise your hand. That very difficult question. Yes, Prabhu.
Third class, we should seek deeper shelter in difficulties.
We should
Seek. We should go deeper in our seeking shelter in difficulties.
Yes. When difficulties, we could say, attack us, even though no one truly wants difficulties to come, but yet when difficulties do come, and they must come, we should seek shelter of Krishna more deeply, because there is an energy, a power that comes to us, born of the distress, of the anxiety, of difficulties. So we should harness that power and let it push us to seek deeper shelter of Krishna. Because why? It's because where else are we going to turn? Especially when the difficulty is the ultimate difficulty of the time of death. Now that is a difficulty, because you try all the tricks that you've used in your life to help you escape from a difficult situation or change the circumstances, but nothing is working. Nothing works. I once was speaking to a nurse, and I asked her, what is the greatest difficulty that you face as a nurse in a hospital? And she said that when people come to the hospital, they expect you to cure them. They expect that the hospital is meant to cure you of your illness, of your ailment, of your problem. And the greatest difficulty that I experience is that I don't have the ability, nor does the hospital have the ability to cure anyone. We try our best, but the cure is coming from a different level. We cannot do it on our own. That's what she said. So, especially, in one sense, life is a practice for that most difficult of times. How many of you, here's a question, how many of you experienced some difficulty today? Raise your hand if you've I won't ask you what it was. Did anyone have a difficulty-free day? You only. No wonder you're smiling so much. Did you have any difficulty today? Excuse me? Small ones. It's very important. It's like exams when we go to school. No one likes exams, but they're there. And what are they meant to do? They're meant to let us see how we are doing. It's like holding up a mirror. And we can discern, we can understand by those exams how we are learning what we are supposed to learn. So the simple difficulties that we face in our lives, no one wants them to come, but they always do come. And if we see them as an assessment, our view of them will change. And when there's a difficulty, watch what your mind does. What usually happens when the world doesn't fully line itself up according to your desire, to my desire? What usually happens? You ask yourself that question. What do you do? You want to tell us? You will reveal it?
No, I'm just giving a suggestion.
What to do?
No, you asked what to do.
But I wasn't asking for advice. I was asking, what do you do personally when there's a difficulty? Are you the kind of person who says, okay, Krishna, if this is what you want, I am your servant, I am surrendered to you? Or there are other kinds of people who become angry. And there are other kinds of people who ignore it. And there are other kinds of people who do this and other kinds of people who do that. And people get frustrated. Like if you're trying to get from one place in Mumbai to another place, and you're in your auto rickshaw or your car, and do you get angry or do you get frustrated? Or there's another alternative, what a lot of people do, they go to sleep. In other words, forget that it's there. But I'm suggesting that there is still another way that we should deal with difficulties, and that other way is we watch ourselves. That's called introspection. We watch how we deal with it. And if I have a difficulty in dealing with the small difficulties in my day, when I have to get on a bus a train, in one of those crowded trains in Mumbai, and I have to go somewhere so crowded that you don't even have to use your legs or your hands to stand up. How do you deal with that? Watch yourself. Watch your mind. Do you take shelter of Krishna? What's your first reaction? When something unexpected happens, what do? Do you take shelter of Krishna? Or do you become angry? Or do you become frustrated? Or do you become sleepy? Or do you get angry at whoever you think did it to you? Because if you think that that's difficult, whatever it is, the difficulty you face today, when Krishna holds that mirror up to you and you see how you reacted to that, if you think that's difficulty, just go to the hospital sometime and see people who are really in difficulty. I once, when a dear devotee friend of mine, he had a terrible car accident, and his spine was broken. And by Krishna's grace, he had an amazing recovery. But they thought he could have easily become no use of his hands, no use of his legs. But in the same ward that he was staying in, there was another man who got into a car accident, and he wasn't able to move his hands or his legs again. And he was married with some children, and one day, I don't know if I should tell this, I'll tell it in a simplified form. One day, his wife came in. One day she came in with the children, one day she came in without the children, and she said, "This is too hard for me. Our marriage is," and there he was, sitting in bed, trying to deal, not sitting in bed, lying there, not able to move either his hands or his legs. And his wife said, "I'm not coming in to see you anymore. It's over. It's just too hard. This is the end." Now, that is a difficulty. Now, how are you going to deal with something like that? How can one deal with something like that where one's whole sense of who one is finished? That's what death is like, except there's so much pain. And you can't, I don't want it to be a frightening, one of those frightening Bhagavatam classes, but yet it is a very difficult time when you can't breathe and there's just so much pain in your body, and then everything that you think of as yours and yourself and all my abilities and all the things I think I can do, you lose them either one by one or all at once. And then all the self-concepts, all the concept that I have, who I think I am, they're gone. Then what do? Who are you? You don't even know who you are, because everything that you think you are isn't there anymore. Do you follow what I mean? Very difficult. Now, how are we going to deal with that? So life, in one sense, is real. Of course, it's meant for service, but it's also meant to practice for this most difficult time, when it's time to leave this body, which we consider as us, even though we know it isn't us. Because if we are our body, which body are we? Are we the 7-year-old body, or the 15-year-old body, or the 20-year-old body, or the 30-year-old body, or the 40-year-old body, or the 50-year-old body, or the 60-year-old body, or the 70-year-old body? Which is us then, if we're our body? Which is me? So when we have when we mistakenly identify ourselves with things that aren't us, what to speak of when we take the sense of self and place it on something that isn't ours. When the sense of self, I think it is I or me, but then when I take it and place it on something that isn't me, this is mine. This is mine. And one by one you lose those. You lose those one by one. And then, who am I? And that, for a person in pain, especially, or any time, it's very confronting. Who am I? And how do I deal with this impossible situation? It's not confronting even, it's terrifying. So, when the little things that happen to us during the day, when they happen, just watch how you and your mind, or your mind deals with them. Do you get angry? Do you get frustrated? Do you go to sleep? Or do you say, I am yours, Krishna, and I am in your hands? If we can do it on simple things during the day, perhaps we can do it at the most difficult time. That time that we were just describing. Now let's just go through those 4 truths again. What was the first one? Raise your hand if you remember. What was the first truth? Yes. You. Yes, Prabhu. The root cause of our suffering.
The root cause of all our pain and suffering is difficulty to discern the problem.
Except if we really see what the root cause is, the ultimate root cause, which is if we don't know the cause, how are we going to remove it? And then there was one we didn't put as one of the 4 is remove pride. Give up pride. Sadadamba hitva. Give up pride. Because our pride is false pride. We're proud of things that don't belong to us. I once had the experience when I was visiting Hong Kong, and the devotees, we have a very kind and affectionate relationship. And they wanted, so they picked me up in a stretch limo one time. They picked me up in a stretch limo, and the devotee said that it wasn't really much more expensive than a taxi. So raise your hand if you've ever ridden in a stretch limo. Yes. It does something to one. This was in Hong Kong, as I said. This does something to your mind. And one of the prerequisites for having a stretched limo, did you ever see a stretched limo that had clear windows? So you could look inside? Did you ever see one like that? Did you notice? They never have clear windows. Why? Because then everyone will wonder, who is this important person inside? You can't see, but you can wonder. And everyone does wonder, who is that? But more interestingly, I can say this from my experience, so they picked us up in the stretch limo, and I got inside with Jagatrini Mataji. And I think at that time the ride probably took 20 minutes or 25 minutes. And I found myself, for that minute, and sort of just like looking at these people outside, these poor people outside. And then we stopped in front of the temple on Chatamgol, and now is the most important time when you're in a stretch limo, because everyone is wondering who's inside. And now Now, of course, when you're in a stretched limo, you never open the door yourself. The driver has to come around and open the door for you. So the driver came around and opened the door. And this was the moment I was waiting for. And people on the side are looking, who is in it? And it was me. And when I stood there and the driver you can't take your own luggage out of the car when it's stretched limo, so he put it there. And then by Krishna's mercy, we were staying on the 4th floor of an apartment. And then the limousine rode away, and there was no lift. And I had to carry all the luggage upstairs myself. So that illusion is a true story. That illusion was very short-lived. That misidentification, that's called, by the way, ahankar. I am my car. So Krishna quickly removed that illusion from me through that very kind but painful gesture. But how quickly we become attached to everything that gives us pleasure, we become attached to. So even if you're in the mode of goodness, and this is the danger of sattva guna, is that you become attached to the things of the mode of goodness, and that the attachment is born of passion, so immediately sattva guna becomes degraded to rajaguna. So the root cause of our difficulty is ignorance, and ignorance is really that we don't know who we are. And who are we? We are Krishna's servant in one form or another. And what was the second point? So we give up pride. We should give up pride because it's almost always false pride, just like my short journey in the stretched limo. It's false. And really I became proud for that 20 minutes. Really, I'm serious. So what was the second truth?
Life's challenges should be viewed through
Mataji, you did not raise your hand. Now you have to go and stand in the corner. Okay, this time we'll forgive you. Okay.
Life's challenges should be viewed through the lens of transcendental.
Yes, we should get transcendental knowledge through association with those who have transcendental knowledge. We should get it. And not only should we get transcendental knowledge, we should view the world through that knowledge. Like, if these were colored reddish, I would view everything would appear reddish. If they were colored blue, everything would appear blue. So we should view the world through the lens of transcendental knowledge. Yes. And the third? Yes.
We should take advantage of the adversities and challenges.
The difficulties or the challenges. Of course, nowadays we're not allowed to say difficulties. We have to say challenges, which is good. Yeah, because they have energy attached to them, because we don't like them. So we want to remove them. We have energy to push them away. And that energy should be turned to spiritual, deepening our spiritual sense of self. And then the fourth one was always, that's the way we want to go. Why do we always take shelter? Why should we always take shelter of Krishna? Think about that. Always take shelter of Krishna. Yes, we should always. Why? Yes, correct answer. But why should we always take shelter of Krishna? Why? Yes. Did you raise your hand? Yes.
Constitutional relation.
That's who we are. we are sheltered by Krishna, but say more about why we should take shelter of Krishna. Yes?
So my attention, Krishna says that everything in this world is in my direction.
But why should we take shelter of Krishna? And this, of course, is a very important question and realization. Did you want to?
Because ultimately it's Krishna only who can do something for us. We are helpless.
Because Krishna really only can give us shelter. Now ask yourself if you really believe that. Because life is meant to deepen our trust in this point. Of course, to depend on Krishna. But when we give ourselves to Krishna, that is called Sharanagati. That is returning to our actual position in relationship with Krishna. Returning to our constitutional, natural position in relationship to Krishna. Krishna, I am yours. I have always been yours, and I always will be yours. Please accept me as your servant. Please allow me to serve you. I give myself to you. That is called Sharanagati. Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. And Krishna says, Aham Tam Sarva Papebhyo. What does Masita mean? Do not fear, do not hesitate, do not worry. So, when a difficulty occurs to you tomorrow, or you can look back on the difficulties that occurred to you today, did you take shelter of Krishna? Did you fear? Did you hesitate? Did you worry? Very important. Now, after the fourth of the truths, I mentioned two others in acronym form that I told you I would not reveal until today. Does anyone remember what they were? Yes. What was the first one again? TOB. Did anyone think all night long and Krishna give them the realization what TOB means? And then NOM? Everyone, as usual, as soon as there's prasadam, right after the class, everyone forgets everything that was said in the class. I noticed that. Hare Krishna Maharaj. So happy to see you. And you know what? It's actually amazing. Krishna has amazing ways of working. Because what we meant by TOB was try our best. Try our best. But NOM means need of mercy. We try our best, but there's a need of mercy. And the reason why this is important in relationship to the story of Sri Narada Muni that he himself told in the 5th and 6th chapter of the 1st canto is that Narada Muni was so ideal when his mother passed away, which was an incredibly difficult circumstance, he viewed it as Krishna's mercy, somehow or another. I don't see what it is at this point, but it's Krishna's mercy. And he viewed it in such a way that he immediately left home and he traveled north. Now, there's a famous story in the pastimes of Sri Ramanujacharya when he had one disciple. I believe his disciple's name was Shrestha. I think it was. Are there any? What was one famous disciple's name? Shrestha. Kuresh, yes, thank you. And Kuresh told him that he asked his master, how could he deepen his faith and realization that he was really being protected by the Lord. And Sripad Ramanujacharya gave him a very simple instruction. It wasn't the same direction that Narada Muni went in, north, but he told him, walk south, go south for a week, and then come back. That was the instruction. And immediately, Kuresh left, following the direction of his Guru Maharaj, and he started walking south. And then night fell, and somehow or another, by the grace of Krishna, he found himself with a place to sleep and some food. And the next morning, what did he do? He continued south. And everywhere he went in the direction of south, he found that somehow or another he was being taken care of. Day after day, he found he had a place to sleep, he had something to eat. And he understood that there were higher powers at work. And indeed, there are always higher powers at work, but the higher powers aren't me. And we tend to think that it is me, and therefore Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, what? Ahankara gamudagma karta ham. I'm the one doing everything. So after 7 days, he had such a deep and continuous experience of Krishna's mercy, of being protected, that he came back with full faith in the protection of Krishna, because he fully depended on Krishna. Gotrate varanam tatam. So Narada Muni was like that, except he headed not south, but north. And as he was living his life, he saw good, he saw bad, but he was trying to see always through the lens of those instructions that the Bhaktivedantas had imparted to him, because he had that taste and he wanted that taste to expand. That taste, as I mentioned yesterday, that taste, as in the words of Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, is the Bhakti Lata Bija, actually. That taste, that hope, that desire, that faith, that I want this from a different realm. I don't want to taste again the pleasures of this world. I may have some attachments, but it is not what I want. So Narada Muni began living his life in this way as he traveled, as he went through life. And Prabhupada in his purport explained, which I didn't read, that our life is supposed to change at the time of initiation. Change drastically. And this is the change that's supposed to occur, that I want this. And initiation means the beginning. To initiate something means the beginning. Now, from now on, I want this. And I'm seeing my life open as it opens before me, as we were speaking of earlier, as an opportunity to get this one thing. awaken my relationship with Krishna. I want that taste. Because I've compared it, and we continue comparing the difference between the taste, a spiritual taste, from good chanting, from good hearing, from good seeing the deities, from good quality, consciously being in the Dham, not mindlessly doing these things. Good association. Consciously experience, be introspective, and decide which taste I want to cultivate. The taste of material pleasures or the taste of spiritual life, based on the descents of Krishna in the world in these forms, of deity, Panchanga Bhakti especially. So Narada Muni went on his life, and then there's no mention of for how long, but he traveled everywhere. He saw the good, he saw the bad. He went in dangerous places, he went in beautiful places, he went in fragrant places, he went in horrid places, terrible places. But he wasn't interested in the good and bad of this world. He was trying to keep himself focused on what was truly important to him. His life was ideal. And then one time, as we heard, he sat down to meditate beneath the banyan tree, and he placed the Lord through the power of his practice, intelligence in his heart. But then the Lord, Sakshat Darshan, he himself appeared by his own free will in his heart, and he went deeply into ecstasy. Narada Muni did, because he was experiencing the Supreme Lord. And then, as we know, just as suddenly as the Lord had appeared by his sweet free will, he disappeared. And Narada Muni stood up. Where is he? Where is the treasure of my life? And he tried again and again to meditate and capture the Lord again, to bring him into his heart. But he couldn't, because the Lord had come by his free will alone. But yet he had tried his best. But it was the Lord's mercy alone that caused his appearance. And then the Lord, out of his kindness, spoke and told him, "You will never again in this life see me." Now, if someone told you that, would you just accept it? Or you would say, "What?" And how would we react? But Narada Muni, after hearing what the Lord said, and he spoke further too, and the Lord told him that the reason why I have given you this taste, shown myself to you, is because I want to increase your hankering, your desire to be with me. You've tasted it so directly, and now it's gone. Now what do you want now? Do you want more of that? Or will you go to sleep? Will you become angry? Will you fill your mind with so many other things? What do you want? What do you want? And Narada Muni was clear. He only wanted the Lord. He only wanted the Lord's association. He only wanted that taste again. He just bowed his head when he heard these instructions in humility and in gratefulness. And then, although one would almost expect some great occurrence to happen, the sky to open up, or some thunderbolt to happen, or some flower airplane to descend and take him. No, he went on traveling, he continued living his life, but he intensified to the extent he intensified his hearing about Krishna and speaking about Krishna and chanting Krishna's names because he wanted that, and he wanted that alone. So he did not let that his consciousness go anywhere else. And whether he went, whether he was with people or alone, whether he was in a happy circumstance or a miserable circumstance, he just kept the chanting of Krishna going on, the glorification of Krishna, because his realization was so deep. This is who I am and this is what I want. I want to stay in that consciousness. And by doing that, and this is what the Lord had told Narada Muni in the Akashvani, he told him, by that hankering to be with Krishna, by that hankering to always be with Krishna, when that increases, tatraloyam apimulam ekalam, then all the dirt within the heart, all the material desires born especially of passion, ignorance, will be removed. And then will become fixed. And then I may ask the question why I chant, and I've been chanting for 50 years now. Why hasn't everything unfortunate within my consciousness been removed? And the answer is in what the Lord told Narada Muni, because the hankering has to be there. The hankering has to be there. The hankering to serve the Lord, to be with the Lord, that taste has to be expanded in the heart. And then one day Narada Muni, it was his time, and he died. And the instant that his gross body dropped to the ground, his spiritual body, he manifested himself as he really was in his spiritual body, because he was cultivating that for years and years and years with his constant chanting and glorification. So there was no gap between his death and his life. It was an ideal life. But I left our talk yesterday, when I described all this, with a question. And the question was, what happens if my life isn't as ideal as Narada Muni's life? What happens if perhaps I make mistakes, perhaps I'm not as sincere and serious and fixed and have been driven by my taste for Krishna? How will Krishna deal with me? Will he stand there and say, you've done this wrong. And this, do you admit it? Yes. And go through the list. So that's a question. How will Krishna deal with someone who's tried his best, but there may be a little imperfection there? And I wanted to tell, this is why this is quite miraculous. In one sense, it's Krishna, and Swamasundar Prabhu calls it Krishna magic, is because the story I want to tell you is a real story, a true story, one that I personally experienced. How Krishna dealt with a very, very special devotee who, I don't have them in the bag over here, but I have something that I have to keep for my throat. And this devotee's name was His Holiness Gunagrai Maharaj. Now, and interestingly, could you show the first of the photos? Now, Gunagrai Maharaj, when I went to the university, we went to the same university. This was 50 years ago. More than 50 years ago, actually. And if you can see, there's one very gentle soul. From the right, yes, right. Oh, do you see Guru Grai Maharaj? Raise your hand if you've ever met His Holiness Guru Grai Maharaj before. Not yes, but here he is during our university days he was a drummer. He was the one who played the drums in the band at our university. Now I went to a university called the State University of New York, and the city that it was in was Buffalo, New York. And we used to call it University of Buffalo. And in India, one would wonder what one learns in Buffalo University. So we went there, and we were friends. Not very, very close friends, but we knew each other quite well. And then they were really trying to become famous for a while, and they were very good. And Maharaj was the drummer in the band, and he was very expert. And then I started chanting Hare Krishna. And then after some time, after I began chanting Hare Krishna, Maharaj began chanting Hare Krishna. And one day, I was in New York City. This was in probably 1969 or 68 sometime. Where were you in 1968? I know where you were. What year were you born in this body? 92. So you were just some Dariwara, some old man in the Himalayas with a big beard, just all Krishna, living in a cave, maybe. So one day we were chanting on the streets of New York City, and who was at that time, his legal name was George. So he came. And he had already been chanting Hare Krishna, and I knew that, and we were old friends, and I was so happy to see him. So I immediately spoke to the devotees, because I knew he was the drummer in the band. So I said, let him play the Madanga, let him play the Madanga. He's a drummer. And they said, no, they didn't say that. But they said, no, only initiated devotees can play the Madanga. And I thought, so I didn't know what to say to him. So I went over to him without knowing what to say. And I said to him, I looked at him and I said, please try to be Krishna conscious. And 50 years later, he reminded me that he didn't know the part about the Madanga, but he reminded me that I had said that to him. Please become Krishna conscious. And it was something that I just said, I meant it sincerely, but I didn't really know what to say to him after that. But he remembered. And keep this in mind. When you're dealing with new people or new devotees, but if we sincerely just speak to them, we don't know what a difference it's going to make in their lives. Now, this wasn't why he became a devotee. Later on, very close to the time when he passed away from this world, he wrote a Vyasa Puja offering to Srila Prabhupada when he explained how he had been looking for truth. In those days, devout people, young people were looking for truth. And they knew that truth and happiness did not exist in the material world. Somehow they knew this. So he was looking for truth. He was looking for God. And he came to the temple on a Sunday feast, a small little building where a few devotees were chanting. And there he heard the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. And at that point, he understood he had found God. He explained this. How powerful is this Hare Krishna Mahamantra? We don't know how powerful it is. So therefore, just based on the authority of Prabhupada and the great devotees, we chant in public, but we don't know. And we preach. And we tell people, please become Krishna conscious. But we don't know the effect of what we are doing. We don't know what it's going to be. We don't know whose heart, whose life is going to be completely changed. So this soul, this very sincere soul, and because Maharaj has passed away about a year and a half ago, and usually just when, we may criticize a person all day long, we may say all kinds of bad things about them, but then when they pass away, when they leave, we just say, oh, this person was so wonderful, and we just explain their glorious qualities. And sometimes I think that it would be good to have almost like funerals for the devotees while they're still in this world, so that we can say all the wonderful things, the qualities that we appreciate about them. So, although we only like to speak about the wonderful qualities, and Maharaj had such incredible, wonderful qualities, I will just say that it wasn't perfect. He was a human being. And the reason why I want to say this, because at this point, as I dealt with him very intimately and very closely, especially during the last 2 years of his life, kept me thinking, how is Krishna going to deal with this soul who served his whole life, who gave everything in the service of Srila Prabhupada and the holy names, who preached his whole life? How is he going to deal with him? And I would like to tell you that story of how I saw that he dealt with him, and how our Jagadivas Prabhu can't see him anymore. Where did he go?
He went back to his place.
Because he was Maharaj's, the austerities he performed, taking care of Maharaj, were incredible. Because this is one of the most difficult services to do, is to be a carer for someone. Maybe I'll explain why, but a little later, but it's a simple answer actually, because you can't have any selfishness in you, and that is the most difficult thing to do, to be fully unselfish, to be fully a servant. Because it goes exactly opposite, exactly against material conditioning, where we keep ourselves in the center, false ego, which is the essence of our existence in the material world, what it is based on, false ego. So, very quickly after Maharaj joined the temple, but before that, in Buffalo City, but before that I had left. I had gone somewhere for some preaching. And that was the spirit of the early days of the movement that Prabhupada so deeply put into us. Maybe you're chanting for 6 months or a year, but spread the chanting of Krishna's names. Go somewhere and spread the chanting, preach. And find out if Krishna will really take care of you. Find out if he's really there. Or it's just some wonderful story, some cultural thing that people believe in, everyone believes in India or something like that. Find out by doing service. Find out if Krishna is really going to take care of you. So that was the spirit of those days. Not expressed like that exactly, but the devotees had that spirit of spreading Krishna consciousness because this is the most wonderful thing. So, His Holiness Gunagraj Maharaj took initiation from Srila Prabhupada, but then we went in different ways. I ended up in Asia, and he was preaching in the United States and in Europe and here and there, especially in the United States. So we knew each other and we had affection for each other. But for more than 45 years, we really didn't have much to do with each other. I was living in Vrindavan for a lot of that time, so when he'd come to Vrindavan, we'd speak about what's going on, we'd talk. But our lives didn't really intersect. And then, perhaps 4 years ago, he found out that he had very, very serious cancer. He was we were basically the same age, so at that time he was probably almost 70 years old. He was a very strong person. He was like a general, and he had such a taste for the holy names. He was the drummer in the band. Krishna had given him this ability to chant Krishna's names, to get absorbed in Krishna's name, to play drums, mridanga. He used to play these conga drums. Krishna had given him such an ability to become absorbed in the holy names. How come you came late?
I got your classes on Saturday.
But how come you came late?
That's why I got the classes tomorrow.
Okay. You told me that? I don't remember you telling me that. Then how come you came early? I think I caught you. Okay. But thank you for coming. Hare Krishna. So then I heard about that Maharaj was very sick, but I didn't really think about it very much because I was busy with my life and he was busy with his life. But then 2 years before he actually left this world, 2 years before he left, then he came to somewhere in South India to try some cure. He was very, very strong and very determined and very regulated. So then I started communicating with him. And more or less, every day almost for 2 years, we were communicating through WhatsApp. And Maharaj had so many wonderful qualities. And one of them was that if someone who he knew and maybe expected something from didn't give him what he expected, what he wished, what he wanted, he didn't have any bad feelings. I saw this. There was no malice or envy when even a person who he thought was a friend didn't come and see him and things like that. I saw this. He was very, very, very free from any envy, from any malice. But he was so particular about everything. This had to be this color, and this had to be in this part of the room, and this had to be like that, and this had to be like that, and this had to be here, and that had to be there. Now, of course, when we were dealing, he wasn't like that with me because we were such old friends. But he was very particular, very strong, and he had such a taste in the holy names. So there was a treatment that he tried in South India, but it wasn't working. So at some point, he came to Bhaktivedanta Hospital in Mumbai, and then he stayed in Chowpatty for a while. And then we, who were amongst those who were telling and being his friend and saying what he should do, you must come to Vrindavan, you must come to Vrindavan. We don't know how long you're going to be in this world. You must come to Vrindavan. So he actually came to Vrindavan, and there were quite a few other devotees who also he was listening to. And another quality that he had was that, at least when he was so open-hearted, he would reveal his heart. He would reveal his mind. He would say whatever was on his mind to me, whatever he thought was going on in his mind. He would completely reveal that. Our friendship was so deep in that way. But yet I was always thinking, how is Krishna going to deal with this soul? When he came to Vrindavan, His Holiness Giriraj Maharaj let him stay in his house. He gave him his house. And later on, the hospice that Maharaj was so instrumental, based on the desire of Atra Mataji, later that's where he left this world too. But for 2 years he lived in Vrindavan, and he wasn't ready to leave. He was strong, he was a general, he was a commander, and he wasn't ready to leave. He tried a treatment by one in Braj, a very famous treatment where you have to take medicine and you have to drink lots of water every day, every day, every day. At one point, near the end of his life, he was drinking, because it was so hot in Vrindavan, he was drinking 9 liters of water a day. Because the medicine he was taking contained mercury. And if he didn't drink that water, according to the doctor, that mercury would poison him. And he was eating only a small amount of food. This was the restrictions that he was given. And he told me, with his strength, he said, I am going to show these Western doctors that cancer can be defeated. I will defeat cancer. But I saw that cancer was winning, because day by day he was getting thinner and thinner and thinner, and weaker and weaker and weaker. So the year before, I had stayed in India, in Vrindavan, till like March of, it must have been, now I'm lost on the years. He left last year, which was 2 years ago, 2018, in September, I believe. And so in March of that year, he was getting weaker and weaker, and he was still fighting with cancer and taking his medicines and following this treatment. And one other quality about Maharaj, that he was such a powerful preacher, that wherever he was, he got some preaching going. He got something going. He was very expert in engaging people. It didn't make a difference who they were, what their capacity was. He would engage them. He would give them affection. He would give them attention. He would give them an opportunity to serve Krishna, an opportunity to chant. He would share with them his love for the holy names. So in the house of His Holiness Giriraj Maharaj, he established something for 2 years, every single night. Every single night he would hold kirtan, and he called it the Vrindavan Kirtan Sangha, and people from all over the world would come when they were visiting Vrindavan. It was right after the Sandhya Arti, or from 6:30 to 7:30 or 8 every night. But gradually, he was getting weaker and weaker. And he couldn't walk there from his bedroom in the back to the front room where the kirtans went on. He was using crutches, then he couldn't hold the crutches. The doctor told him, you have to exercise. And he would try to exercise a little bit, but he was getting weaker and weaker. And then finally he had to use one of those rolling walkers. But the kirtan every night would go on without fail. Sometimes he would be in so much pain from the cancer that was spreading that he could only lie down in bed. And then the kirtan would begin at 6:30, and somehow or another he would dress himself in full sannyasi dress, and somehow or another, either with the crutches or the walker, he would come to the kirtan and sit down and play the drums, the conga drums, or he used to play this beltry. And practically speaking, as he told me on many occasions, all the pain would go away by the power of his absorption in the kirtan, the chanting of Krishna's holy names. And Jagannath used to worship his deity every day of Govardhananath. And the kirtans were wonderful, and people would come. But he was getting weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker. And when I left Vrindavan in March, in my mind, when I went to see him right before I left, and in my mind, I took a mental picture of him because I was thinking that I would probably never see him again. But I kept up. I was in Australia. I did my little preaching and this and that and writing. But every day we would be in touch. He would tell me what was going on, how difficult it was, and the issues with the servants and this and that. He would tell me, we would discuss every day. And then he understood at some point that he had to change his mind. Instead of fighting to live, he had to prepare to leave this world. And by this time, he was really thin. There was nothing left of his body, practically speaking. But up to that time, he was trying to fight and fight. But there has to be a time when we stop that fight and surrender to the reality that we're going to leave this world very soon and leave behind everything except what we hold most dear, our attachment to Krishna, attachment to Guru, attachment to Vaishnavas, spiritual attachments. We're going to leave everything else behind. And it's such a change in consciousness, the decision to fight, to keep living, to struggle. And indeed, it becomes such a struggle. Eating becomes a struggle. Little bits. Moving in your bed from this way to that way becomes a struggle. Everything. And it's time, and we all at some point are going to have to confront this when if I ask right now, How many of you think that you're going to live within your body forever? No one will raise their hand. How many of you think that you're going to die? Everyone will raise their hand. But to actually confront the fact that it's going to happen soon, inevitably, but soon. And now I have to really take shelter of Krishna fully, because there's no other shelter that's going to actually give me shelter. Although I've tried to take shelter of so many other things. But now is the time to put what I really know is true into practice. And then that question comes to us. Do I really know it's true? How deep is my faith really? It's tested, believe me, it's tested. And therefore, as I said, the little difficulties in life, we forget them, we try to push them out of the way, we become angry, we go to sleep, we become this, we do that. They are very important, because really we want to learn the art of taking shelter of Krishna, and how well we learn that art will be tested. It will be tested for each and every one of us. And who will say they're ready? There's the proof. And we all remember for our school days, no one likes exams. But yet, we have to face them. So I was planning to come to Vrindavan in October, middle of October, and it's so hot. Has anyone ever been in Vrindavan in this Vrindavan summer? It is a little warm, isn't it? The highest I've ever heard it got to is 57. But usually it can go 50, 51, very common. It's so hot. And there's very few people, none of the guests who say how wonderful Vrindavan is. They've all gone back to their place because no one likes the Vrindavan heat. It's just too much. So the number of people in the kirtans were going down, but yet every day they were going on. And then Maharaj he knew it was time. And I was waiting for this, to tell you the truth. I was waiting because I knew this cure wasn't going to, it wasn't working sufficiently, it wasn't working. But when someone has that kind of trust in it, you can't say it isn't going to work. And I said, yes it is, no it's not, yes it is, no it's not. So I was just waiting. When Maharaj understood that it wasn't going to work, that he had to change his mood, instead of to live, but change his mood to now I must die. I wanted to be there with him and for him. So I was planning on coming in October, and then suddenly I received a message, a WhatsApp message. And he said in the message, in a voice that's hard for me to imitate, and now I understand why Jagannath has disappeared, I think. He said, please come, I'm all alone. Meaning he didn't have any of his godbrothers with him. Now what are you going to do? You have your plans when you want to come and do something, and you have all the other things that you had planned to do, give this seminar, give that class. Now what do you do when you get a message from that, like that, from an old, dear, and respected friend? What do you do? Well, you all know what you do. You get there as quickly as you can, and that's what we did. And by that time, Maharaj had just left the room where he had been staying for 2 years with Giriraj in Giriraj Maharaj's place, and he had moved to the hospice, and the devotees were so kind to him. They gave him the biggest room, and they put an air conditioning in for him because it was still so hot, although the rain started to come. But August, September in Vrindavan is so hot, it's so humid. So I got, and I'll tell you one thing is that the elderly, even when they're ready to leave, they tend to not want to leave their house. Because they've been there, they're used to it, they know how to get to the bathroom, they know this, they know that. But the body is like a house too, and we don't want to leave this house either, but we have to. And the care that the devotees, the Ganivas and the other devotees, Nanda, they were giving him, but it's so difficult to care for a person because it's so intense, because please move me to this side, now move me to this side. 24 hours a day of unselfishness. So he moved from the house of Giriraj to the palliative care center where he would be able to be assisted by the nurses and the doctors. And yet, for all the times the kirtan was going on every night. And one sadhu said, after he had left, he said, one night the kirtan stopped and I knew Maharaj had gone. So when I got there, he was very, very weak. And His Holiness Ratatvajra Maharaj came specifically to help take care. His Holiness Subhag Maharaj instructed 6 disciples to come, brahmacharis, to come and just help take care of him. Devotees from the Krishna Balaram Mandir community would come every night. The doctors, Dr. Ananta Singh Prabhu, and the nurses, everyone, they would take, this was all being supplied. He was in Vrindavan. And I began to see how Krishna, how by Prabhupada's mercy, by the mercy of the devotees in Prabhupada's society, the sincere devotees, I began to really see that he was being taken care of so incredibly. But I couldn't yet see what was going to happen, which was more or less a miracle. And I kept wondering, well, how is Krishna going to take care of him? A person who has given his whole life to preaching, to the Sankirtan movement, but maybe perhaps not 100%, or maybe only 99%, or whatever percentage, that's up to Krishna to judge. Because of course Krishna, as we find out, is Bhava Grahi Janardana. We, or at least I, tend to see the faults, and Krishna sees the essential sincerity. So when Maharaj, Ratatvajra Maharaj and I were there, we were spending a lot of time with him, and Ratatvajra Maharaj is very, very funny and humorous, and he would tell him all these funny stories about the early days that he had to go through in Krishna consciousness. And we were talking to him, and he was holding on so tightly to life. He didn't want to leave. And his godbrothers would sometimes phone him, and he was so grateful to anyone who ever had helped him in any way. He was so grateful. I watched this. And then we saw, and then I remember His Holiness Gopal Krishna Maharaj coming, His Holiness Lokanath Maharaj coming, and this was a season when not many devotees were there in Vrindavan. And then it was becoming clearer, and the doctor was saying that there's only a few days left. His disciples helped as much as they can. They were always helping, but they were mostly from a far away South America point, and they couldn't help that much. They couldn't come even. But it was nearing the end. And we tend to think, very easily we tend to think, oh, I'm going to chant Hare Krishna and hear about Krishna at the end of my life. I'll surround myself with people who are just chanting and reading to me Chaitanya Charitamrita and Krishna book, but believe me, it's not always as easy as that. Because I saw that His Holiness Gunagai Maharaj only wanted to hear about Krishna, but the practical necessities of having a body that was soon to die takes up so much time and so much of the little energy that you have. Brushing your teeth becomes a major thing that you do in your life. Using the bathroom becomes major. Turning when you're in the bed. And this is one of the symptoms that I've seen when the soul is more or less time to leave the body, is that no matter what position you're in, it's not comfortable. So you say, please turn me this way, and that becomes a major thing. Turn me on my side, and you're okay for 15 minutes. Please turn me this way. Please turn me this way. It's so hard. You have to take this medicine. You have to take that medicine. The doctors are coming in, checking this. It's so hard. It's so difficult in these times to actually have the time and the energy to hear and chant. The body makes its demands, and you cannot say no to it so easily. Maharaj had two fears that he confided in me, and I shall confide in you those two fears. He said, I fear that at the end I'm going to be alone, because it's so difficult. I'll be alone, and there won't be anyone nearby, especially my godbrothers, to remind me to chant and to support me. And the second fear was that the pain will be so great that I'll have to take so much medication that my consciousness is going to be covered and I won't be able to remember Krishna. And therefore, he was so strong. He fought off taking any medication for so long, despite the great pain that his cancer was causing him. And one day, well, we were just two of us sitting together and talking about this and talking about that. One day he said to me, this was just a couple of days before he left, maybe 2, he said to me, I cannot tell you how difficult this is. You cannot understand how difficult this is. Because you're in this world of your body, and everyone else is living their life. And they come and say hello, and they say, how are you, and this and that and that. But no one understands what's really going on as the soul is preparing to leave, and how difficult it is. And then His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj came, and I remember the way he was in Mumbai, And then when he heard that Guru Maharaj was soon to leave, he left what he was doing and he came. So at that point, this was like 3 days before he left, the three of us were with him more or less all the time. And His Holiness Guru Maharaj had given Radhanath Maharaj, His Holiness Radhanath Maharaj, the first book, Krishna Conscious book. Maharaj had gone to a music festival or something, and Guru Maharaj had probably forced him to take a book. And I think Radhanath Maharaj tells it that the way he tells the story is that some person was, Guru Maharaj was trying to sell him a book, and some person was trying to sell him some intoxicants. And they were saying, you can't, they were fighting with each other, and Radhanath Maharaj was saying, I have no money anyway. And they got busy saying, you shouldn't be doing this, and you shouldn't be doing this, that he ended up with this book. It had this picture of Prabhupada in it. And he kept that picture of Prabhupada for so long as he traveled in Europe. So Radhanath Maharaj felt indebted. And we all saw that he was holding on. He didn't want to leave. So one morning, the three of us were sitting around him, because in the mornings his consciousness was the clearest, because the rest of the day was this and this, and he had already having to start taking some medications. But one morning I had an inspiration, and the three of us were sitting around his bed, and I began telling him a story. And he couldn't practically move at that time, but his consciousness was clear. And I started telling him a story based on different parts of his life that he had told me. So I began saying to him, there was once a young boy who was always a theist, who always believed in God. But he didn't know who God was. So he asked his mother, Mother, are those clouds in the sky God? And his mother replied, No, son, they are not God, they are clouds. But she couldn't tell him who God was, although he was looking. Then that boy grew. He went to school, he went to high school, he went to university. He was in the drums, he played the drums in a band. But still, he was looking for God, and he didn't know where to find him or what he looked like. So I was telling him this story. And then one day, he went to a kirtan. And when he was at that kirtan, he knew he had found God. Previously, I had asked him, where was his faith so strong that he couldn't doubt that? We used to have very intimate talks, very open and honest talks. Those are the questions that sometimes we're afraid to even ask ourselves, what to speak of answer them honestly, even if no one else is around. But what do you fully have faith in that you cannot, that's unshakable? And he told me two things. He said, I have full faith in the holy names, and I have full faith in Srila Prabhupada. So when I was telling him the story of his life, when I got to the point about the kirtan, and he had found God in that, And I continued saying, and then you met Prabhupada. That boy met Prabhupada, who he had full faith in. And Prabhupada told him about Krishna and who Krishna was. So he had found God, and he had found his spiritual master. And then I said, now you should put yourself in the hands of the holy names and Srila Prabhupada. And at the end, and that was all. And then later they said, thank you so much. And then Tattva Maharaj spoke to him, expressed his deepest realizations, and Radhanath Maharaj expressed his deepest realizations, that you don't have to stay here anymore. Just hold tightly to the feet of the holy names and to Srila Prabhupada, and you can go. Because there was so much suffer already. So perhaps one day later, 2 days at most, I think it was the next night, the doctors told us that this was it. At this time, there was almost nothing left of his body. And devotees, all the devotees in the community came around and were chanting and chanting. There was so much support. There was so much support. So much support had been given, and so much support. He was in Vrindavan. So much support had been given to him by the mercy of Krishna, Srimati Radharani, the dust of Vrindavan, Krishna Balaram, Gaunitai, because he had served his whole life. But he was in so much pain. And this was one of the things he was afraid of. Because when you're in so much pain, you can't think of Krishna. And if they give you medication, you can't think of Krishna. And then, Govinda Maharaj, His Holiness B.B. Govinda Maharaj, who was in Houston, Texas at that time at a festival, when he heard that it was time for Gunagraj Maharaj to leave, because Gunagraj Maharaj had made him into a devotee who had first preached to him. He got on a plane and arrived there just the morning before, just 24 hours traveling, just arriving the morning before he left. And Govinda Maharaj, with all the devotees surrounding, so many devotees, Govinda Maharaj chanted for 6 hours, kirtan. And Gunagraj Maharaj at that time, he was on a drip. It was so difficult, but he was in so much pain. So the doctor had to increase the medication. But still he was in so much pain. And Govinda Maharaj, after 6 hours of kirtan, he stopped and he sat down, and another devotee took over, and Govinda Maharaj sat there. And Tattva Maharaj and himself and other devotees, Kileshwar, was sitting around him, and the night was going and going and going, and the kirtan was going on, and then he was in so much pain. And there was this machine that the doctors had hooked up, where they put a sensor on your foot or your finger, and the machine is showing your life symptoms. It's up, it's down, it's going up, it's going down. And we're all watching Maharaj, we're watching the screen and like that. And then only in peculiar Kali Yuga this could happen. But at this most difficult and intimate time, devotees had their phones out and were live streaming Maharaj's disappearance on Facebook and thousands of people all over the world were watching, I started getting very upset at this. But then I understood later that this was also a part of a plan by Krishna, that I shall now tell you what happened. That Govinda Maharaj stood up, and Gunagai Maharaj was in so much pain. I was holding on one arm, and he was going, ah, ah. And there was a nurse Mataji who was there and saying, because I was holding his hand, and she said, I think you're hurting him. And I said, you don't understand what's going on. You should see the nail marks in my arm where he's hurting me. He's squeezing so hard in his pain. And the doctor had to increase the medication still more, and that didn't work anymore until his head went back, his eyes went back, his mouth opened, and I've seen this before, and he went into a coma. And this is what he was afraid of. What choice did the doctor have? So then Govinda Maharaj stood up, and it was at this time so late at night. It was nearing. Actually, it wasn't night anymore. It was all night long. We were chanting. It was the Brahma Muhurta hours, and he was in a coma. And Govinda Maharaj got up, and I thought maybe he was going to leave. He was going to leave, but no. Instead, he stood right next to Gunagai Maharaj and started chanting loudly in his ears. First he was chanting, and we were all chanting, Radhe Sham, Radhe Jai, Radhe Sham. And then he started chanting the Maha Mantra loudly, very close to his ears. And the room was filled with devotees, and everyone is chanting and chanting, and everyone's watching. His mouth is open, and his eyes are back, which means he's in a coma. And then, with Govinda Maharaj chanting loudly in his ear, His Holiness Gunagai Maharaj, his mouth began to move. And he began. We couldn't hear the sound, but it was clear. He was chanting Krishna's names. Later on, in speaking to the doctor, because this was basically impossible. And later on, I was speaking to the doctor months later. I said, do you remember that night? And he said, and he's a palliative care doctor. And he said, I'll remember it to the day I die because of what happened. Govinda Maharaj is chanting loudly, and Gunagai Maharaj is chanting. Although he's in a coma, he was getting, how can I say it, some special mercy from Krishna. And then, at one point, and this is all being live streamed, broadcast all over the world. And devotees all over the world, disciples, friends, well-wishers, are watching him chant. And then at some point, the screen went down, and it was over. The doctor came and confirmed it was over. He had left. And the kirtan was so wonderful, and the atmosphere was so wonderful during the Brahma Muhurta hours in Vrindavan, during the auspicious Chaturmasya. I think it was the month of Bhadra. It felt like the whole spiritual world had opened up. And everyone clearly understood that Krishna had taken this great soul back to Godhead. No one had any doubt. And my question was clearly answered. How is Krishna going to deal with this great soul who had really tried his best, but was in need of mercy too? And Krishna had given him full mercy and taken him home. So that is my answer to the question, this amazing story of His Holiness Konagramraj. That is the answer, my answer to the question of what if we're not up to the standard of Narada Muni, where his life seemed to proceed so perfectly from Shraddha, from curse to sadhu sangha, to ruchi, nishta ruchi, to prema. If our life is not 100% up to that standard, we should know that Krishna is very merciful. And we should try our best to really give our life as best we can to Srila Prabhupada's movement. We should try our best. Okay, that is the end of this presentation and of the seminar, 3-class seminar. We have just a few minutes left. Thank you very much for attending and listening so carefully. And there's just a few minutes left. Anyone have any questions? Yes, Mataji.
Hare Krishna. Prabhu, I am from a family where we worship Shiva. And so many years I have come to ISKCON in 2012.
Yes.
Okay, and since my childhood I have been praying to Shiva.
Yes.
Okay, but after reading Bhagavad Gita, and I have come to realize that Krishna is the high supreme God. Okay. Now the question is that suppose now when I came in 2012, I had come under Pramod Prabhu.
You had?
Pramod Prabhu.
Yes.
Okay, and after that he was there with us for 1 year and then he left. Then he left ISKCON. Okay. Now after that I am in contact with Radhika Kanai Prabhu and Rupilas Prabhu. But after coming for 1 year, then I was for some reason or other, I had a downfall which everything went upside down which I was not able to realize. But and there was a gap also in between for 2 years.
But what is the question? This is my question.
The question is that now my family is totally against that when I was praying to Shiva, I was having a very joyful life. After coming to ISKCON, my life has been very testified and I have lost many things.
You have lost?
Many things. They have lost my family, they could come to ISKCON only, I and my family coming to ISKCON, and they have a fight with me that you leave ISKCON. So
Yes.
now, what I should do?
Mataji, I never met you before, and you're putting your whole life in my hands. Very unlikely. But who amongst the devotees are you closest to? Who among the devotees are you closest to?
I'm also the ex-employee of ISKCON.
Okay, but that didn't answer my question. Who amongst the devotees are you very close to, who you trust, who is senior to you, who is fixed, who you trust their advice?
I trust not. Why? She shifted from and I talked to her various about this.
Mataji, this is a very complicated question. In the sense that I can tell you what to do in one sense, but it will be theoretical. But you need someone who knows you, who you trust, who can advise you in the situation. The theoretical advice that I would like to give you is that you should worship Lord Shiva. You should worship Lord Shiva.
Worshiping Shiva.
Yes, Mataji, you asked me, so you have to listen. You have to listen. You should worship Lord Shiva, but not as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but as Vaishnavanam Yata Shambhu, as the greatest devotee of the Lord, as according to the Srimad Bhagavatam. Then that's one bit of advice. But this is just theoretical from a person you've just met today. No, you have to listen, because you asked me. Take away the microphone. No, yes, you have to give it up. You asked me, but now I'm going to tell you more advice, but you won't need the microphone to listen. You can give it up, don't worry, don't be afraid. I know you want to say something, but it's also getting late. But you asked me a question. Do you want to hear my answer or do you want to say something?
I want to say something. 2 lines.
Okay, then you say your 2 lines. Go ahead.
What is the difference I find over here? Because I read Shiva.
That's 1 line.
Yeah, Shiva have the snakes in his neck. He takes everybody and walks alone. Okay? Every animal and everybody. He walks alone. But Krishna is selected. He keeps the Maya Devi outside the. That means the Rahu Ketu have no entrance inside that. Means the snake does not have entrance in his param. Okay? Then there is a separation has
That's
been
much
done.
more than 2 sentences.
Prabhuji, that is because 4 days before I was very tense. Okay, Prabhuji.
I think it's continued for 4 days.
Prabhuji, every Prabhuji scared of me. They run away from me. I don't know why. And
Mataji, you have to learn one thing. To listen. Because you won't. Because if you just talk and explain all the things that you think and all the things that you know, you'll stay the same. Because it's already what you know. But if you listen, you shall learn and improve. Okay? Well, you didn't. You said you didn't want an answer. You wanted to talk. So you got it. And I gave you an answer. The answer is listen. Yes. Excuse me. Who? Some of the senior Matajis. Betty. After we finish over here, please go speak to her and try to help this Mataji, because she sincerely would like some answers. Yes.
Thank you very much for your seminar. After hearing the pastime of Bhurijana Maharaj leaving this world, what is your advice for a practicing sadhaka like me?
What is the?
What is your advice? Because if he has dedicated his entire life for the preaching of holy name, for the pleasure of Prabhupada,
Yes.
and if he is suffering like this in the last moment of his
Yes.
life,
Yes.
so what is going to happen?
Hare Krishna. At this point, I'm not sure. Bombay is always full of surprises, I noticed that. Thank you, Prabhu. Betty. Now I understand why everyone loves Bombay so much. It's never boring. It's never dull. In some ways, it reminds me of New York. Yes.
So, after hearing the glorious departure of Bhurijana Maharaj, and as he described that he fully dedicated himself and the lotus feet of Prabhupada and teaching of the holy name. So, what is our hope? Because I am not so dedicated like Bhurijana Maharaj, and
Try your best. but know that you're in need of mercy. But that's the case for everyone. That's the situation for everyone. Please try your best. Follow the program, follow the principles, and be humble and know that you need just one moment mercy. Because ultimately, it is mercy, Krishna's mercy, that will open the door and carry us home. Yes?
When I try, I make some sankalpa. That
You?
I make some sankalpa, some determination.
Yes.
I chant 16 rounds at one place, I chant Kyava, I chant 64 rounds. That goes on for a while, a short period of time. Again I fail. And I can become hopeless.
Yes. First point is don't become hopeless, but lose your hope in your own ability. But don't lose hope in Krishna's mercy. Yes.
Thank you.
Because what is the meaning of Trinadapi Suni Trinatorodapi? It means that we don't have any hope by our own power. So therefore, Kirtaniya Sadahari, that allows us to chant. And Dainya and Prema, according to Srila Sanatana Goswami and Brihad Bhagavatamrita, they are the same. So Dainya, or humility, means that you lose your hope in your own ability to save yourself. You try your best, but you take shelter of Krishna. And therein lies our hope. In Krishna's causeless mercy. That's my answer. Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. It's a nice class. My question is that before surrendering fully and leaving up to Krishna's hand our things, that try is there always from our side that let me fix the problem.
That's also practical. Yes.
So, how we know that whether the first part of fixing the problem I am doing right, or should I give that thing in Krishna's hand?
We have to try our best. But ultimately we know that even our best is not sufficient. Because unless Krishna gives sanction, it won't work, our best. And then when we do service, as you well know, when we do service, we see that Krishna uses us. And that is the pleasure of a devotee, to be engaged in Krishna's service. Do you understand? Do you know what I mean? You have that experience? Of course, no one will say, yes, I have that experience, but... So, but your question was, how do I know how much to try my best? How much to keep trying? And how much to just depend on Krishna? So there is a tension between those two. But like when you're sick, you go to the doctor, you take medicine. But you know that unless Krishna cures you through that medicine, it's not going to exact its cure. So you try your best in a practical way. You keep your feet on the ground and be practical, but you depend on Krishna. This is the essential teaching of the Bhagavad Gita. You fight, nimitta karan, bhava, savya satyan, you fight, but you want Krishna to do it. You do your part, but you know that it's Krishna who's really the ultimate doer. I'm not sure I answered your question. Just wait 1 second. Yeah, depend on Krishna and try your best. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna. You mentioned Yolyam is only more hankering for this taste and
It gives the power to the chanting.
yeah. Sometimes I have experienced also some that hankering is there, and without force we are able to serve and we are able to attend Bhagavatam and everything. But the problem is that hankering, how this hankering can be maintained continuously.
You can't, it's a gift.
So how this gift can be attracted?
How it can be?
It's a gift from. So
How can you control Krishna? And
What we can do from our part that this gift can.
notice when it's not there and pray to Krishna to help you. And of course we have our regulated programs that we do. But this is what humility is. When you realize that this was a gift from Krishna, some taste in chanting, and that you're dependent on Krishna for that taste. So when he opens the door and gives you the taste, take full advantage of it. That's one point. Don't take it for granted, because if you take a gift for granted, you won't get more. I mean, for granted means don't take it understanding its value. I'm not sure I answered your question either. Because your question was, how can I increase my hankering so that my desire, so I always constantly experience that. And my answer was that it's very much a gift. But also, if you associate, you do the right thing, you chant properly as best you can, and you associate with devotees more sincere than you. Do you know anyone more sincere than you? Okay, so you're so fortunate. Okay, perhaps one more question. I will ask someone who not yet has asked.
Thank you for the class. You were mentioning about that I may have some attachment, but that is what I don't want. So you were mentioning about that how our life should change in the time of initiation. That at least from this time,
That's what Prabhupada explains that in his purport also.
But then, what to know of the attachment? That attachment is there, and that creates problem later on. So at the time of temptation, when it comes, it becomes really difficult.
Yes. Yes.
How to leave that attachment? Although
Become more attached to Krishna. Param Drisva Navartite. The more we're attached to Krishna, this is what Narada Muni was told by the Lord, the more you hanker for me, the more you'll be free from material desires. But this is one answer. But the whole process that we follow answers your question, your question, your question. This is what we're doing. We're living, associating with devotees, we're chanting Hare Krishna, we're attending programs, we're hearing Bhagavatam, we're serving Radharas Vihari. Our whole process, we're doing serving devotees, just to decrease our material attachment and increase our attachment to Krishna. This is the purpose of it, of everything we're doing. So I know the feeling that you are experiencing as far, what can I do to immediately become what I want to become, a very pure devotee. What can I do immediately, like taking a pill that is going to help? But it doesn't work like that. It's a gradual process. Generally, of course, mercy can come and then it can be like that, but we can't control that mercy. We can't make it happen. We can't force it to happen. But if we try to act sincerely, as Srila Prabhupada used to quote his Guru Maharaj, don't try to see Krishna, but act in such a way that... so we try to humbly understand our position, try to serve. Who should we serve? We should serve everyone. We try our best, and then balance that with the practical parts of our life and what we have to do and we have to get done. And then know that, we want to depend on Krishna's mercy and increase that desire. How do we increase that desire? Is that you stand in front of Radha Rasbihari and you tell them, look at my position. You stand in front of your Guru Maharaj, the Vaishnavas, Srila Prabhupada, and tell them your position. Look at me. I have so many material attachments. Unless you're merciful to me, what hope do I have? You honestly open up your heart to the Supreme Personality of Godhead and His representatives. Okay? Okay, yes, Prabhu. But it's almost getting to my bedtime also.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
So, many times I have heard that in your time, in the ISKCON and the private days, devotees were going outside when they are just 6 months, 1 year. So they are going outside and preaching, they are taking the mission. So enthusiastically. Nowadays, when we are here, most of the time we are here going outside every place time. And my question is that in those days, either you were all staying in one temple and you were going for preaching and coming back to that temple, or you were going separately to start up one new thing?
Both. Both were going on. But I will tell you some point to balance that. There was this incredible preaching spirit that Prabhupada encouraged. But there is a but to it. And the but was that everyone was young and immature and didn't really know very much and didn't have very much sadachar. And we were enthusiastic, but we also caused problems. So the glory of it was the spirit wanting to please Prabhupada by preaching. But the drawback was that we didn't have maturity. And that didn't always work out well. We thought we knew everything, but we didn't. So in some senses, we want to learn the spirit from that Prabhupada filled us with. You know, in 1968, we thought that within a few years, the whole world would become Krishna conscious. Really. And that everyone would be pure devotees. We'd all be pure devotees. We'd have no desires other than we'd be full with love of Krishna. But it ended up being a little more difficult than that. So there were benefits. There was a spirit in those days that was wonderful. But there was also a shadow that came along with that. And nowadays, there are so many devotees, there is so much security, and there are so many people to give you guidance and counseling, but maybe that spirit is lacking too. So if we could put all the pieces together in one place, it would benefit us all. Okay, any other last question? Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. So, Prabhuji, we heard that Narad Muni, when he heard from Lord that he is not going to get the taste anymore.
He wasn't going to see the Lord darshan, darshanam kuyogina, namam drastam vivarhati.
So, how did he continue to endeavor for that taste?
It wasn't the taste, he had the taste from the beginning. But it kept on increasing until the Lord actually showed himself fully to him. And then after that, he wanted that and that alone. And the method by which he tried to get it was wherever he was, whatever he was doing, he was chanting, he was glorifying the Lord. He didn't care. He just wanted that one thing. Because he had that wealth and then lost that wealth, and he wanted that back. And the Lord specifically told him that by desiring that to get it back, and by acting in this way, basically, based on that desire, that was the way to become mature spiritually, to do both things, remove the negative from the consciousness, and to increase the positive meaning one's desire to be with Krishna. Did that answer your question? Are you sure? Because you don't look 100%. Go ahead, keep going.
So he knew, it's an absolute statement that the Lord made that you are not going to see me in this entire life again.
Yes.
But then he's still endeavoring.
Okay, so you're taking your consciousness and putting it in Narada Muni's body, and you're thinking how angry I'd be at him for doing this to me. But Narada Muni was better than us, because he realized that he had been given such a gift, and you can't complain that you've been given a gift and it's not exactly the way that you wanted it. See, that's, I'm not criticizing you, because I tend to be a bit like that too. You know, I want things the way I want. But Krishna is God. He's the transcendental autocrat. He's the supreme controller. And I don't want to be the one who tells you this personally, but you're not. And it's hard to accept this fact and to be grateful for what Krishna gives us. Because I know there's a part of most of us that says, I don't know why Krishna organizes the things the way, organizes the universe the way he organized it. If he would only listen to me, I could do a much better job. So, first of all, he should have given Narada Muni his Saksha Darshan and stayed with him forever. That's the first thing I want to tell him. The second thing was that he should do the same for me. And it's almost 9:25 and I have to go soon, so there's 5 minutes left for him to, he should do it now also. And that would be very good. And also, when I'm traveling in Bombay, do you go by car? Do you have your own car? How do you go? Huh? I want empty buses and empty trains, except sometimes my friends can be on. Now this is management. So surrender means you accept that Krishna is the best of doctors. You want to say any more? Maybe instead of in front of the deities, instead of having donation boxes, we should have suggestion boxes. By the way, Krishna, Rasvihari, your timings aren't convenient. It sounds funny, doesn't it? But that's what we do all the time. Okay, good night. Thank you very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srila Prabhupada Bhakti Vrinda ki jai. Thank you all for that.
Hare Krishna.